Hello, and welcome to Thrive. Now, this is an interesting little game. It is completely open source. It's been in development for, I think, 12 years now. And basically, its mission statement is to make Spore how it should have been, at least from the perspective of people making it. Now, if you're familiar with the history of Spore, you're well aware that it had quite a few concept arts and demos that looked like the game was going to be entirely different, take a more realistic approach than it ended up in the end. This project sort of spawned from a bunch of people that thought that that wasn't the correct direction and decided to make their own. Now, as you can tell from 12 years in development to get this far, that they didn't exactly have a plan on how exactly to do it or the means to. But over the course of the last 2 years, they have gotten an incredible amount of work done. And today, you have an early access version of it available on Steam. You can download it for $5. But not only that, on the Thrive website, which I will link in the description along with the Steam link, you can just download the game for free. It is completely free if you want it to be, but if you want to support the devs, you can go give them $5 on Steam, donate to their Patreon, yada yada yada, all that. But so basically, if you've never played Spore, don't know what that is, this is a game where you play as an organism that evolves from being a single cell all the way up to a civilization with like space age technology. And now currently the game is still very, very early in its development, and we only have a cell stage. And they have just recently added a beta for the multicellular stage, which, I mean, it's gonna be a long time until that's anywhere near a sort of good state, because they still have a lot of stuff in the cell stage that's not done. But I mean, they're making progress pretty fast, especially compared to the past, and it is very fun to play for a few hours. So with no more further ado, let's get right into it. So here we are, one tiny bit of cytoplasm and a volcanic vent. And you get to the actual game. Now I'm going to turn the tutorial off because I've already done that. But yeah, on a distant alien planet, eons of volcanic activity and meteor impacts have led to the development of a new phenomenon in the universe: life. Simple microbes reside in the deep regions of the ocean. You are the last universal common ancestor on this planet. To survive in this hostile world, you'll need to collect any compounds that you can find and evolve across generations to compete against the other species of microbes. So, here we are in the Chegaburinese volcanic vents, and this is me, little cell right here, and as you can see there is glucose here, which is slowly ticking down. Now glucose produces ATP, which you need to move, and also to keep your cell from exploding, because it can't maintain osmoregulation, and it just simply can't maintain its membrane and will die. So you need to collect more glucose just simply in order to survive. Now other compounds like ammonia right here, which you see on the left went up, and phosphate, which is right here. Now that stuff you use to actually evolve and reproduce. So here you have a bunch of different statistics, yada yada yada, but really just tells you, okay, you have how many of your species, how many of other species, how much your population has changed, all of that. Though one interesting thing that this screen does tell you is the amount of glucose has been reduced by 80% of the original amount. Now, free-flowing glucose goes down by 80% every time you evolve. So while eating glucose may be good for now, not so much in the future, at least gain it directly from the environment. And over here we have the patch map where you have all these different environments, which have different, right now they only have different compounds. Atmospheric gases do not change whatsoever, and when it comes to physical conditions, the only one that matters at the moment is sunlight, which upper regions have in abundance. Down here, not so much. And so, you can move to these new patches if you just want to get a different assortment of compounds that's more beneficial. So right here in the vents, we have a ton of hydrogen sulfide, which can be converted into glucose. Glucose, I already explained that. Iron, which can also produce energy, same as glucose, though quite a bit less efficient in the long run. And ammonia and phosphate. And you'll notice that here we've got a little bit more glucose, about 1% more glucose, no hydrogen sulfide, bit less iron, and a whole lot less ammonia and phosphate. And now, sometimes it could be a good idea to just make a beeline to the surface if you're trying a plant build, for example. But there is something to be said for staying in the volcanic vents for a couple evolutions just because of the massive amount of ammonia and phosphate. So I think I'll stay here for now. So here we have the cell editor. If you played Spore, very familiar to you. This is where you edit your cell, you add all these different organelles. They can do quite a few different things. But right now, only thing I'm going to do is add a couple of metabolosomes, which turn glucose into ATP. Now, cytoplasm does the same thing just by itself, but a lot less efficiently than metabolosomes can. So, add 2 of those, and you'll see mutation points up here determine basically how much I can change the cell in one generation. Now, you only get 100 of them, and with these costing 45, and all these costing right about the same amount, you can only add a tiny amount each generation, so you have to gradually evolve your cell. You can't just make completely massive changes and completely redo your organism like you can in Spore, where you just drag and drop every single part. Now this one is a bit more continuity, and with that much here, I guess I can explain this. They have ATP production here, so metabolosomes producing quite a bit. Then you have the ATP being used up. Osmoregulation is just the cost of your cell existing. And movement is the ATP used up whenever you move around. Now, you never want this little bar here to exceed this bar, because if you do, well, if you allow osmoregulation, all other parts, just to exceed this, you will begin to die immediately, and you will likely going to go extinct very fast because you can't produce enough energy just to exist. Now, you can have your movement go above this bar, but you pretty much don't want that to happen in almost any situation, because that'll mean that your ATP will go down whenever you move. Once the ATP reaches 0, you start taking damage. Now, that can allow you to make an organism that can move a little bit if you just, keep a little bit of ATP and move a bit slower. Well, that's a bit of a pain in the butt. But let's get moving. So, okay, we still got abundant stuff here, though I'm concerned that we've got absolutely no glucose around. And as you can see, health is going down because no glucose, no ATP, no osmoregulation. And at this point, it's best to cut my losses, reproduce. And I can... yeah, 2% more glucose over in this patch, which is the... Chegaeobones seafloor. Yeah, these names are randomly generated, but these are not. Though they are actually planning to make this sort of patch map something that is randomly generated, and a bit of more replayability. Now, with excess energy, now you don't really want to have excess energy, because that means you have an organelle that basically isn't contributing. All it's doing is eating more glucose. Now, Flagellum, which is the only organelle at the moment that increases your speed. Cilia, not added yet. So just add that to the back here. And it increases my speed from 64 to 88. So that's like a 24 increase in speed. Very good, because the faster you go, faster you can get to compounds. And speaking of compounds, you can add chemoreceptors. Now, chemoreceptors are really good. So you add them on, and they can actually find any compound you want. So, if I want to find glucose out in the world, I sort of don't want to starve to death constantly. Up the search radius, get the amount to about here. And now, whenever I'm out and about swimming, this will lead me straight to glucose. Now, unfortunately for this cell, I didn't have any glucose at all whenever I decided to reproduce, meaning that unfortunately, he's gonna die. That is not the end, because you'll respawn with a full glucose amount. Now, once you get enough storage, it doesn't give you the full amount, but it gives you a pretty decent amount just to try to make your way in the world. Oh, you see right there, little line. That should lead me to some glucose clouds. And pretty much whenever you first come to a region, the place is starting to get populated with different clouds of compounds, and also is just full of your own species, screwing you over by taking all of your resources. Oh, come on. Yeah, this thing's not producing much ammonia, but it's something. And okay, seems like this thing is completely out of ammonia. Now, a decent strategy is just to sit still, have a cloud of glucose or something like that, and just wait for compound clouds to appear. Because that will make you use a whole lot less ATP, a lot less glucose. Of course, my guys are going to screw that up a little bit. Now, hopefully, see? We got a little bit of ammonia here. Just get that up. And there we go. So now right here, I may be able to afford another flagellum. Nope, not at all. See? ATP production, too low. Basically, if I tried to move around with this cell, even if it is very, very fast, it would lose ATP and begin to die if I just tried to constantly move like I can currently. Now, right now my goal in the long term should be get a nucleus. Now, the nucleus doesn't do anything on its own. It is actually a huge dead weight, but that's because it is an investment. Because once you get a nucleus, you unlock all of these organelles. You get mitochondria, you get chloroplast, all the other stuff you learned about in middle school that are much more efficient than... these are proteins, not organelles. Whatever. Basically, much more efficient versions of the proteins you can find here. Except for iron. You cannot make a... how do you even pronounce that? Rusticinin? Yeah, I'm going with that. A rusticinin. That does not have an organelle equivalent, but mitochondria turns glucose into ATP very effectively. Chloroplast, if you want to be a plant, convert sunlight into glucose. Very, very effective for just surviving. However, if I wanted to add a nucleus, it's huge, and look at that. Immediately. I mean, I believe that almost triples my actual amount that I'm using at the moment. Like, it is insane. Makes osmoregulation go up a ton, movement cost goes up a ton because there's a whole lot more cell. So what I should be doing is adding more metabolosomes. Actually, I want to put it somewhere like right here eventually. I want to put a metabolosome here and here. Basically get enough of an excess of ATP that I can afford to put in a nucleus. Now I can switch patches right now, which, interestingly enough, it has a tiny bit more ammonia and phosphate, and about 1% more glucose. But I'm in a pretty good spot at the moment in this patch, so I think I'll stay around for at least one more generation. Alright, now I think I might be able to get, yep, phosphate up immediately. And now all I've got to do is find some ammonia. Now, one bad thing about thriving so much is that my cells are all over the place and eating up absolutely everything at the same time as I'm trying to. Alright, there we go. Get a nice cloud of ammonia. And come on. Gotta be enough in here. There we go. Take some for the road. And probably get glucose filled up before I decide to reproduce. Ooh. Yeah, that's not much. Okay, there we go. That is a decent amount. Okay, so now move up to this patch. And right, with my current energy production, still not enough to support a nucleus. So, oh yeah, and using this tool down here, you can have symmetry when you place cells. So, put this right... think about, like, this. Even if it hurts the speed quite a bit. As you grow bigger, any single bit of cell you put on decreases the speed because it increases your size. So I think that'll... yeah, that'll be fine. Okay, first thing I do, go into a new patch. Just do not move, because nothing has populated the patch. Oh, see, there we go. Should be glucose up here. Basically, top up on that if possible. Ugh. Yeah, my guys are making quite the competition. But sometimes you just gotta wait for clouds of compounds to actually spawn before moving, because whenever you go into a new patch, it is brand new. Alright, phosphate here, and is that... that might be enough ammonia. Come on. Okay, not enough. I guess this is a good time to point out, as you can see, whenever you've got some of these compounds, you start to grow more of your organelles. Because basically what you're doing is you're reproducing by mitosis. You're building a whole nother cell in yourself, then splitting off. And the unfortunate thing is, once you reach a certain point in this, you're starting to maintain basically 2 cells rather than 1, which makes it difficult to survive sometimes, because you're having to intake more resources. But on the plus side, you also get more storage space. As you can see, all those went down because there is more storage space. I can try to get topped off here. Now, because the reason you want to have excess of anything and everything is because whenever you split off into your next cell, you'll actually have, like, half of those resources left. So having full glucose can be very, very useful for your next cell surviving. I could move up here, because it's got more glucose. Down here, a whole lot less glucose going on. And this one, there is some diversity in the population. Might be seeing some other cells. So I think I'm gonna stay here for at least one more... yeah, one more generation. So now, if we just move this... actually, hold up. How big is this? Yeah, move it about there. About there, and even moving these and deleting them costs mutation points. So we add this, and it can survive. It is not collapsing in on itself and dying. Now, this generation can't add anything else because the nucleus is the most expensive organelle in the entire game. But the subsequent generations, we can definitely do some interesting stuff with it. Okay, now I've gone from a prokaryotic cell to a eukaryotic cell. And yeah, this really puts it into perspective just how massive the nucleus is. Now I'm just dwarfing the previous generations here, with just one organelle added. There we go, there's a cloud. It's got barely anything to— oh, that's a different species. Yes. So by pressing G, you can actually do absorption, which allows you to eat any stray organelles in the water, or any cells of different species. And you can basically just take any compounds they have in them. And that's pretty much how you become a predator, which is, I mean, my favorite playstyle. Not the only playstyle, but it is pretty good and pretty fun considering, I mean, plants are fine and all, but we sort of aren't plants in real life. You know, we like to see things move, we operate on a time scale where we want to actually see stuff happen. Alright, so now move patch up here, and aha. So you see, I'm not in this patch yet, but other species have actually propagated here. And because basically whenever you have any species present in one patch, they can move on to the next patch. So let's see, if I move here, it's got a decent population. Okay, and now, get rid of these metabolosomes and produce ATP with mitochondria instead. So currently, let's see, I make 47.9 to 40. Place that with mitochondria. So that increases ATP production by 3, and doesn't use up any more energy. I mean, it might seem like a very modest increase, but it really adds up. Would like to get 2 chemoreceptors, one for ammonia, one for phosphate, so I can try to reproduce more effectively. But I think this is good for the moment. Alright, the Chegabayernese Mesopelagic. Yeah, not good with these names at all. Oh, thought you could get past me. Yeah, cells can be different colors. I never really bother changing the color of the cell, but the AI can sometimes use it to great effect when it blends into the background. Which isn't something that's, you know, programmed to happen. They sort of just do it by random chance, and because you as the player use visual identification for stuff, unlike the AI, it can actually fool you. And the really interesting thing is that it actually organically makes natural selection favor cells that actually blend into their environment. Because whenever you kill a cell, whenever you eat one, it will affect that cell's population later on. So it's a really cool bit of just evolution that happens sort of naturally as you play the game. Let's see, let's just get rid of these two. Replace them. And then probably get mitochondria here and here, and that should be enough energy production to get me some chemoreceptors and maybe even a couple more flagella. Yeah, being a predator is very, very effective, especially when the cells you're eating are just full of all the chemicals you need. Come on. Okay. So actually, even though I don't need glucose at the moment, the glucose receptor can be useful because it can help me find areas with glucose where other cells will try to congregate. So can I get 2 chemoreceptors currently? I can't afford that. Okay, right, modify you. go for ammonia. Get you, and go for phosphate. And then next evolution, I can worry about getting more energy overall. Now, do I want to move areas? There's not much going on here. See, now that I'm sort of spec'd into a predator lifestyle, I'd like to remain where there's actually prey around. Now, I probably could survive here just solely off of glucose in the environment, but being a predator is so effective. I'm at Generation 9, it'll be Generation 10 next, which is halfway to the game's current end goal. Currently, once you get to Generation 20, you get a little screen that says you've beat the game. That doesn't lock you out anything, you can pretty much play indefinitely, but that's sort of the point that the devs have decided, like, okay, once you've made it to here, you're in a good spot. The bad thing is I don't have... I think I've got enough speed to catch one of these guys, maybe. That's a big maybe. Nah, I'm too slow. You see, the downside of actually growing my cell and being able to reproduce is that all these extra organelles and stuff are weighing me down. There we go. Oh no. Once you're out of energy, you're unable to consume stuff. So this cell is practically dead in the water, so I'll just kill it. The way that you get a game over is that if you die enough times, you'll go extinct. Because every time you die, it actually affects your species' total population in the world. Once that dips to a certain amount, you just lose. Okay, come on. Come on, buddy. There we go. So yeah, I think my first priority is actually going to have to be getting faster. Because if I was able to actually outrun those little cells earlier, I could have already reproduced and gone to the next generation by now. Come on. Just a tiny bit more ammonia. Just a tiny bit more. Come on, buddy. There we go. Okay, let's see. Yeah, definitely don't have enough energy for... Okay, right, if I take a gamble and say that this generation gets slower instead of faster... Actually, there is something else I can do. Over here you have membranes. They all have different effects, but the real difference that matters is these two allow you to absorb other cells, hunt them down, and also absorb organelles in the water. These four do not. You can't engulf other cells with them. Now, they're good if you're playing like a plant or something, you don't need that. But if you are playing a predator like me, that is suicide. So I think what I'll do is I'll go from a normal membrane to a double membrane, which decreases the mobility just a little bit, but it makes osmoregulation cost go down, so my cell can use a little bit more of its energy towards something else. And it also increases my health by a fair amount. Resource absorption speed doesn't really matter on these guys. On these guys, you can get very, very punitive. Right here, just gets that down. I think... Oh yeah, next evolution, I should be able to get a flagellum. Though actually, I wonder... I'm with 55... Okay, I can afford one. Nice. So that takes me from 45 to 57 right now, which might be crucial for my survival. So alright, we'll change the membrane. probably next evolution, because I want to even this out. I don't have to keep my cell symmetrical, but I sort of like doing it like that anyways. Let's see, do I want to switch patches? Ooh. Okay. You've got some good ones up here. The upper patches... I mean, okay, there's no science to back me up on this, so take it with a grain of salt, but I think that the upper patches do get more variety and a lot more cells because you have cells that are able to be plants, and whenever you have plants, they can just produce all the glucose they need. Meanwhile, areas like this, it's basically all these cells are sharing the bit of glucose that's left. I mean, you look at places like down here, there's like no glucose left at all. So you know what, let's go up here. Okay, first thing, do not move at all. Save that glucose. And also waiting around allows cells to spawn, along with compounds. All we need is a little bit of phosphate, which these guys probably have. And I'll take a little bit more. There we go. Now, can I add another flagellum? I can. Now, the problem with adding more and more flagella is that you get diminishing returns. So right now, let's say I go 57.6, that goes up to 68.2, so that's about 10 speed I get, which is pretty good still. But as you'll recall, I got around 20-ish at the very beginning, because as the size of the cell increases, you just get less and less speed. Take that and also get another mitochondria. And then that should support me for anything else I want to bother with. Alright, we got a good herd of these guys, just gobble them up. Come on. Just a little bit more phosphate. Just the tiniest bit. Okay, there's a bunch of invisible phosphate over here. That's the bad thing about areas closer to the surface, is that, at least with how the backgrounds are currently, it can be really hard to see the compound clouds sometimes. Like, they'll just go full-on invisible. Okay, if I eat this guy, I think that's a reasonable amount of glucose to have. Okay, good enough for me. Let's get rid of you. And replace you with a vacuole. Now the vacuole doesn't really do anything but add storage, so it adds 8 storage. So I go from 9.5 all the way up to 17.5, basically doubling my storage, which just makes things easier for me with every subsequent generation as a result. The chemoreceptor for glucose is still useful, barely, but I'm probably going to get rid of it at some point once glucose gets so low that it's just a non-factor. Like here, there's still 2.5%, so there is some utility to having it, but at a certain point, you might as well just get rid of it. Oh! Alright, something auto-evolved to have a nucleus. And unfortunately, I've immediately killed it. The auto-evolve is really not that good at making cells get nucleuses, because, I mean, it's an investment, and they need to have a ton of excess energy in order to get it. Alright, that has already got me going. Let's see if I can just get that tiny bit more glucose. Because if I can store a decent amount, that will go a long way for the next generation. Okay, come on, just take a few bites out of you guys. There we go. Alright, that'll do. So now, once you reach this point, I mean, this cell is pretty good. Like, it can survive decently well on its own in this environment, pretty much indefinitely, as long as there is food for it to eat. Now, I could just keep this going for 7 whole generations until the end of the game. Or, option number 2 is to mess around with the binding agent and signaling agent. So, let's say I get rid of this. Replace it with... oh, nope. Okay, put you two right here. Decreases my speed by about 4. Not so bad. Now, the signaling agent allows me to command other members of the species, so I can tell them to come towards me, go away, that kind of thing. Which, I mean, has limited usefulness. However, when combined with the binding agent, that allows me to actually combine with other members of my species. And when you do that, you share your resources, you move together, you move a whole lot slower because... yeah, it's just not efficient for movement being that huge. But once you get 5 cells binded together, you can enter into the multicellular beta. So, I can say move to me. Oh, hold up. Eat this guy first. Okay, and then press B, and he is now attached to me. I can do it to this guy. This guy, and come on, let's see if we can get one of these. Come on. There we go. And basically just become a huge colony of cells. And as you can see, we now share just a ton of resources. And you can basically just keep doing this indefinitely if you really feel like it. Like, you don't actually have to evolve your cell at all and get to this point. You can just decide to be one piece of cytoplasm, if you so wish. I mean, for 20 generations, as long as you live, and it works, then you're perfectly capable of surviving with numerous strategies that don't really involve doing much. Oh, this is actually getting... jeez. Yeah, a bit ridiculous in size, though I'm loving it. But yeah, at this point I could press U to get rid of the colony and make all these cells go their separate way. And then with that I could reproduce, you know, as per usual. Or I can press this, though actually now I'm just curious how many of these guys can I get? I mean, I could like cover the whole screen with my guys. Okay, come on, let's just eat this guy real quick. Oh, jeez. Oh, that poor guy stuck in the middle. Yep, sucks to be you. Oh, you thought you could have a nucleus? Too bad. Ooh, that guy's actually too big to absorb. Okay, yeah, we could have up to 800 glucose. It's steadily going down. Okay, I was just going to go into multicellular, but now I'm curious how big I can make this thing. Now, for a predator, this isn't too effective of a strategy, but if you're a plant, like, it could actually work out just being a huge colony, since you could just produce your own glucose and not have to chase it down. Okay, I think I'm starting to lag the game. Okay, multicellular. Okay, so now you unlock the multicellular stage, basically, and the editor for it, where you can basically have different cells duplicate a type of cell. So, I don't know, I'll just call it E. because why not? Not gonna use it. And you can modify these two cells separately. Just go into modify type, you can change this one up. I'm not going to because it costs mutation points and the editor is a bit buggy. And you just have yourself from before. And so using this, you can add cells. I'm not going to do it because, again, it's buggy. You can't actually remove them unless you press delete over them, which is a dev tool that's just left over, and you don't get your mutation points back. But using the system, you can specialize one cell, then add it in. You could have a cell that's good for, like, energy. Just make a cell that's entirely mitochondria. You could make one that's entirely flagella. For movement, you could make one that's entirely made out of these spikes, just to kill anything around it. And that's the kind of specialization that, I mean, once this game is much further along in development, kind of specialization that'll allow you to grow big enough to enter the 3D multicellular stage, which does not exist yet. That is way, way off. I just realized this music is really nice. Well, alright. Now, the big thing in the current version, at least in my opinion, with becoming multicellular, is that you don't actually have to become multiple cells. I can leave my cell like this. But the big change is reproduction. Now, instead of reproducing through mitosis, we reproduce by budding. And that means that I no longer grow all these organelles as I get compounds. Instead, it's just a process where my cell is as normal as it ever is, and it reproduces into a full new cell perfectly fine without making a bunch of organelles that can screw with your energy output, your speed, all of that. So this is very, very useful for survival. Move this over to double, become a tiny bit more efficient, and yeah, fluidity, rigidity, doesn't really do much. It's basically a trade between health and mobility. Though health, honestly, don't need it too much at the moment, so I'll just keep it down here, just to get that little bit of speed. Though, is it really worth it? I'm gonna say no. Though with 50 I could... You know, we'll get rid of this. And actually move these two up here. Yeah, I'll move you here, you here. That looks a bit better. Oh geez. Oh geez. Flee. I forgot I did the whole crazy thing with those guys. Ooh, that might actually be hard for me to reproduce in this area, or just survive, because if I've got that many cells all around, then they might actually eat all of my food. Alright, as you can see, very close to reproducing, but no extra organelles, which means no loss to speed. There we go, that's decent. Alright, so with this generation... Did I change E instead of stem? No, I changed stem, didn't I? Yeah. Okay. So if I add in spikes here and here... Alright, that's good. Now, you could add a spike to the front, but the bad thing if you do that is that it makes it much harder to absorb cells because they're constantly pushed away by the spike. Now, without it there, but with two spikes here, sort of like tusks or something, it allows you to eat cells because these are pointed outwards, so smaller cells you can eat, but you can still use them to poke cells, and it allows you to eat cells that are larger than you. Earlier, you might have noticed that the one cell with the nucleus I couldn't actually eat, because cells that are equivalent in size to you, you just can't eat them, because you can't get around them. If they're larger than you, then they could eat you. That doesn't tend to happen because the player is able to get to having a nucleus a lot easier than the AI does. So it doesn't tend to happen, because the player is much more efficient. But this right here is a very good, very efficient Predator build. And one bug that exists for being multicellular is that the single-celled version of yourself is not considered the same species, and you can just go kill and cannibalize them. Which is very useful for me right here. But that probably won't always be the case, seeing as it's a bug. Yeah. Because you can easily exploit it like this. Oh, ooh. Ooh, he's got like cellulose or something as a shell. So you see, he can't absorb him because he's too big, but I can repeatedly hit him with the spike. And did that guy have 2 nuclei? No clue. Alright, at this point my cell, I mean, since I'm not going to like take it into multicellular properly and make specialized cell, this is pretty much my final version of this species. So I'm just gonna keep it alive for 4 more generations. And I'll get the victory screen. Okay, right here you see they've started to evolve spikes. So if I try to get near them to devour them, they hurt me. But using my own spikes, which are larger than theirs, I can get around them. And these guys have their spikes in the front, so when they're trying to flee from me, can't actually use them. Which is very useful for me. There we go. Let's just eat some of you guys up. Boom. Alright, another generation. Oh geez. Yeah, once the AI starts evolving spikes, things start to get more interesting. Because getting prey is not just simply a matter of being faster than them. You actually have to do a tiny bit of wiggling in order to not die. Alright, another generation. Oh yeah, there are so many cells around here. Just so easy to eat them all. Okay, let's get away from my guys. Now, is this the final generation? I think it is. Okay, reproduce one more time, and that's game over. Ow, ow, ow. Yeah, if you get too cocky with these guys that have spikes in the back, you are... I mean, you can get yourself killed even when you're doing really good. Okay, come on. There we go. Oh, just like that. And lost half my health to this guy. There we go. Just eat that, and I believe this is it. So confirm. And there we go, you have thrived. Congratulations, you have won this version of Thrive. You may continue playing after the screen closes if you wish, or start a new game in a new world. And then it's telling me about how I can become a multicellular organism, which I've already done before completing the game. So it just points you in that direction as a thing that you can do. Ooh, is that? Ah, that's an earlier version of my species. There you go. But yeah, at this point, you can just swim around, keep evolving, etc. for as long as you want. Though I usually don't bother doing so unless I'm messing around with the multicellular stage. You know, one thing I actually would like to show, if I'm able... Oh, geez. Is right, the different patches now. Now, by this point, every patch has a dozen or so species that, I mean, they are in the thousands. And you can just move to any patch you want, though once you've been specialized into a certain way of doing things, you might find yourself trapped. For example, so if you live here, well, actually rather, if you live right here, so if you're living in this environment, you're either feeding on other cells, a very inefficient plant, or you're feeding on iron. So if iron is your primary, source of food, and the only place you can move has exactly 0 iron, then you're pretty much stuck in this niche unless you modify yourself slowly into another type in order to move here. At this point in the game, just tons of cells, tons of variety, and my cell being a predator, it can pretty much survive just about anywhere. These 4 environments here are all the same, really, with slightly differing amounts of glucose, and a couple of them have iron in small amounts, but them all having sunlight means that you get about the same stuff in each. But there you have it, so that is Thrive. It's a fun little game. You can spend a few hours playing it. And I will have the links, as I said before, to the free version on their website and the Steam version. And I'm really excited to see where this game goes. I mean, I don't expect it to do crazy things and to be like a AAA title like Spore. Honestly, if this game just gets to the point where it has a fully functional cell stage, fully fleshed out, up to multicellular, and if the game just died out at that point, it's still a pretty good cell game. Like, it has a unique niche that only Spore and maybe some other obscure titles have, which is just, 2D, building a cell, going around surviving. So it's definitely got a nice spot. And then if they get to the creature stage, that's something I'm really looking forward to if they're able to make it that far. Because when it comes to strategy, when it comes to a tribal stage, a civilization stage, a space stage, that is a gaming niche that is comfortably filled by other things. I mean, you've got Civ, you've got RTS games like Age of Empires, you've got 4X games like Crusader Kings, like Vicky 3 is coming out sometime soon. And then for Space Stage, you've got Stellaris that can comfortably cover that niche. But when it comes to evolving a creature, evolving a cell into an animal, and evolving an animal into a sapience being, that is something that I think only Spore has ever done. It's definitely something I am looking forward to in the future, and I hope that this game can reach its lofty goals. And I don't think this is going to be the last time this game is on the channel. I've noticed that there aren't that many guides to the different strategies out there, and the ones that do exist are pretty outdated, so I might make a few tutorials, because I've gotta say it was pretty difficult just starting the game out. I mean, the tutorial in the game is pretty good, but it leaves a lot of stuff open for the player to discover, which is perfectly fine. It was actually a cool experience, just going, oh hey, here's the different strategies that work, here's how I can use all of these things. I didn't bother using anything but metabolosomes and mitochondria until a few playthroughs in. I decided, okay, I'm going to use iron as my main thing, and you have to deal with the world in a different way when you have different food sources. Adds a lot of replayability. On that note, I'll be stopping it here. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.